The house was quiet that morning, too quiet for a home with children. Sunlight touched the long glass windows of the Harris mansion, but even that light felt cold. For 7 years, the only sounds that filled those walls were footsteps, distant music, and the whisper of doctors giving reports that never changed. The twin boys, Liam and Logan, had never spoken a word since birth. Michael Harris stood by the living room window with a cup of black coffee in his hand. His eyes were fixed on the garden, but his mind was far away. He had grown used to silence, almost learned to live with it. Every corner of the house reminded him of what he had lost. The laughter of his wife, Emily, used to fill these rooms. Now, only emptiness remained. The doctor said the boys were born healthy, their hearts strong, their minds bright. But something was missing. They would look at people, follow sounds, even smile faintly at cartoons. Yet no word, not even a cry, came out. Michael had spent millions trying to fix what he thought was broken. Therapists came and went. Specialists promised progress, but nothing ever changed. The silence became normal, even for him. That morning began like any other. The maids cleaned the halls quietly. The gardener trimmed the roses outside. And Ava Johnson, the new maid, was in the nursery arranging toys that had gathered dust. She had only worked there for 3 weeks, and unlike the others, she never seemed afraid of silence. She talked to the boys, even when they didn't respond. She told them stories about rainbows, sang small songs, and smiled as if they were listening. Michael barely noticed her at first. To him, she was just another housemaid who would eventually leave when she realized how empty this home was. But she didn't leave. Every day, she stayed with the twins longer than anyone else. Sometimes, Michael would pass by the door and hear her gentle voice. It wasn't loud, but it carried warmth, something that had been missing in his home for years. That morning, he was about to leave for work when a sound stopped him. It was faint, like a whisper carried through air. He froze. His briefcase slipped slightly from his hand. The sound came again, clearer this time, soft and trembling. "Mommy." For a second, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. He slowly turned toward the hallway. His heart beat heavy, his breath caught halfway. He walked closer to the nursery door and stood there, listening. The word came again, this time from both voices. "Mommy." Michael's hands shook as he pushed the door open. Inside, sunlight poured through the curtains, lighting up the faces of his twin boys. They were sitting on the floor, their eyes locked on Ava. She was kneeling beside them, a small storybook open on her lap, her hands frozen mid-air. The boys looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Michael stood there, speechless. For years, he had begged to hear their voices. He had prayed, shouted, cried, even cursed the heavens. And now, 2 simple words had broken the silence. Not through a doctor, not through a machine, but through the maid he barely noticed. Ava turned her head slowly, her eyes wide with surprise. "Sir," she whispered, almost afraid. "I didn't mean to, they just said it." Michael took a step closer, unable to breathe properly. "Say it again," he said quietly, his voice shaking. The twins looked at him, then at Ava, and together, they said it once more. "Mommy." Tears filled Ava's eyes. She reached out gently, touching their small hands. "It's okay, babies," she said softly, her voice trembling. "It's okay." Michael's knees weakened. He leaned against the doorway, his mind spinning. He wanted to speak, but no words came. He only stared at them, trying to understand what he was seeing. How could this woman, a stranger in his house, make them do what years of experts could not? After a long moment, the boys leaned forward and hugged Ava's arms. She froze, then slowly wrapped her hands around them, holding them close. The twins smiled, small but real smiles that lit up their faces. Michael stepped into the room, his shoes making a small sound on the wooden floor. "How did you do that?" he asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried confusion and disbelief. Ava looked down at the boys before answering. "I don't know, sir. I just talk to them. I tell them stories. I sing songs my mother used to sing to me. I make them feel safe." "Safe," Michael repeated quietly. That word stayed in his mind like an echo. The doctor visits, the tests, the money, none of it had brought this. Yet this simple woman, sitting on the floor in her black and white uniform, had done the impossible. He walked closer, kneeling beside his sons. Liam touched his father's sleeve, something he hadn't done in months. Michael's eyes softened, his throat tight. He looked up at Ava again, and for the first time, he really saw her. Not as a maid, but as someone who carried something he had lost long ago: warmth. The twins giggled softly as Ava brushed their hair aside. Michael hadn't heard that sound in years. He didn't know whether to smile or cry. He stood there in silence, watching them, unsure what this moment meant. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat alone in his study, staring at a photo of Emily holding the twins when they were babies. He could still hear that word, "Mommy," echoing in his head. His mind couldn't understand it, but his heart felt something move for the first time in years. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was sure: something had changed in that house, and deep inside, he was afraid and hopeful at the same time, because miracles don't happen twice. Yet one had just happened under his roof. The next morning came slowly, wrapped in soft light that slipped through the curtains. Michael Harris sat at the dining table, his coffee untouched. The sound of birds outside used to annoy him, but that morning it felt strange, almost alive. He could still hear that word in his head, the word that changed everything: Mommy. His mind couldn't rest. He wanted to believe what he heard was real, but fear whispered that it might have been a dream. After all the years of silence, could his sons really have spoken? He needed proof, something to hold on to. He stood up and walked toward the nursery. The closer he got, the slower his steps became. His hands were shaking again. He opened the door quietly. Ava was sitting on the rug, her back turned to him. The twins sat across from her, their small faces glowing with calmness. The room looked warmer now. The toys that once lay scattered and untouched were lined neatly beside them. Ava was reading a story in a soft voice, one that carried warmth in every word. The twins followed her lips as if each sound mattered. Then she began to sing. The melody was slow and gentle, the kind of song that made the air still. Michael froze. He knew that song. It was a lullaby Emily used to sing when the boys were babies. He hadn't heard it since the night she died. His chest tightened, his breath caught. Ava didn't see him standing there. Her voice trembled slightly as she sang, "Sleep, little stars. The sky will keep you bright. Mommy's near, even through the night." The twins smiled softly, their eyes closing as if they remembered that sound. When the song ended, Liam reached forward, touching Ava's hand. Logan giggled, trying to repeat a sound. It wasn't clear, but it was a word trying to form. Michael's throat went dry. He stepped into the room. Ava turned quickly, startled. "Sir, I didn't know you were here," she said quietly. He looked at her, confused and shaken. "Where did you hear that song?" Ava blinked. "I found it written inside a notebook in the nursery closet. It looked old. I thought it might be one of Mrs. Harris's things. It had some drawings and words written beside them, like bedtime notes for the boys." Michael's eyes softened. He walked to the shelf and picked up the small brown notebook resting there. His hands trembled as he opened it. The handwriting was familiar, curved, neat, and loving. Emily's handwriting. He ran his fingers over the pages. There were small doodles of stars, moons, and hearts. On one page, in faded ink, Emily had written, "For when I'm not here, sing this to them. It will remind them of home." Michael couldn't hold back the tears. He closed the book and pressed it to his chest. The memories rushed in like waves he could no longer stop. He saw Emily standing in the same room years ago, holding the babies close, her voice singing the same song Ava had just sung. Ava stood still, unsure whether to speak. The twins looked between them, their faces calm and curious. Michael finally spoke, his voice low. "You used her song. You used her words." Ava nodded slowly. "I didn't know, sir. I only wanted to help them feel safe. Sometimes children listen when they feel love, not fear." Those words struck something deep inside him. Love. The one thing he had locked away since Emily's death. He had tried to replace it with control, with structure, with money, but none of it had touched the silence that lived in his home. He looked at his sons again. Their eyes followed Ava's every move, their bodies relaxed, their small hands reaching toward her. It was like she carried a light they could see even when he couldn't. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air in the room felt heavy but warm. Then Liam turned to his father and made a small sound. It wasn't a word, just a broken syllable, but it made Michael's heart jump. "Did you hear that?" Ava whispered, her eyes wide. Michael nodded slowly. "I heard." He knelt beside his sons, his voice gentle. "Say it again, Liam. Try again." Liam smiled, his tiny mouth moving, but the sound faded halfway. Michael reached out and placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Take your time." Ava's voice joined softly. "You're doing so well, sweetheart." For the first time, Michael noticed how carefully she spoke, how patient she was. Every word she said carried care, not command. He realized she didn't see them as broken, she saw them as children. Later that day, Michael sat in his study, holding Emily's notebook again. The rain started outside, tapping gently on the window. He read the notes she had written years ago. Words about love, about touch, about being present. He whispered one of the lines to himself. "If they ever stop speaking, remind them they are still heard." He looked up at the wall where Emily's portrait hung. Her smile was soft, almost alive. He whispered, "I forgot how to remind them, Em." The house that used to feel like stone now seemed to breathe again. He could hear faint laughter from the nursery. He closed his eyes, letting the sound fill him. Night came quickly. The mansion lights glowed faintly against the rain. Ava helped the twins into bed, humming quietly. When Michael walked past their room, he stopped again at the door. Ava was sitting by the bed, stroking Logan's hair as he drifted to sleep. Liam had his hand curled around her finger. The sight made Michael's chest tighten again. Not with pain this time, but something softer. When she turned to leave, their eyes met. "You can go rest, sir," she said softly. "They'll be fine tonight." He nodded, but his voice barely came out. "Thank you." As she walked past him, the faint scent of lavender filled the air. For a moment, he felt something stir in him, something he hadn't felt in years' peace. He stood by the door long after she left, watching his son sleep. In the dim light, they looked calm, free, and safe. For the first time, he whispered to himself, "Maybe it's not a miracle. Maybe it's love finding its way back home." Outside, the rain slowed, and a soft wind moved through the trees. Inside, Michael knew something had shifted forever. Days passed slowly inside the Harris mansion. The silence that once ruled every corner now carried the sound of small laughter, faint but real. For the first time, Michael Harris woke up to a home that felt alive. The twins were changing, little by little. They still didn't speak full words, but their eyes spoke for them. They looked at Ava like she was someone they had known forever. Michael noticed it every day. When she entered the room, their faces lit up. When she left, their eyes followed her until the door closed. Sometimes, he stood in the hallway just watching her, the way she smiled, the way she touched their hands gently, the way she talked to them as if they were listening. It was something he could not understand, yet he could not ignore. One evening, Dark clouds gathered over the mansion. The air outside turned heavy, and thunder rumbled far away. Michael sat in his office going through business files, but his mind was elsewhere. His company meetings no longer felt important. Every thought returned to his sons and the quiet maid who had changed their world. As the first drops of rain hit the window, he heard movement down the hallway. The twins had been restless. Ava had told him they didn't like storms. He decided to check on them. The house lights flickered once. Thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the windows. Michael quickened his steps and reached the nursery door. He opened it slowly. Ava was sitting between the two beds, holding both boys close. The lights were dim, the rain hitting hard against the glass. She whispered softly, trying to calm them. Her voice was low and steady. "It's okay, my loves. It's just the rain talking." The boys trembled, covering their ears. Ava rocked them gently, humming a slow tune. Michael stood by the door, silent. He had never seen anyone comfort them like that. Even when doctors tried, the twins would cry harder. But now, they leaned into her, their breathing slowing as her song filled the room. After a while, she noticed him standing there. "They're scared, sir," she said quietly. "But they're trying to be brave." Michael walked in and knelt beside her. The twins looked up at him, their faces pale but calm. He reached out and touched Liam's shoulder. "It's all right, son," he said softly. "Daddy's here." A small sound escaped from Liam's lips, weak but clear. "Da." Michael froze. Ava's eyes widened. "Did you hear that?" He nodded slowly, tears already forming. "Say it again, Liam," he whispered. The boy tried again. "Da." The sound faded, but it was enough. Michael let out a deep breath, almost a cry. Logan smiled and repeated the same sound, as if copying his brother. Ava smiled through her tears. "They're speaking to you," she whispered. "They know you're here." The thunder roared again, louder this time. The lights went out for a second, plunging the room into darkness. Ava held the boys tighter, her hand trembling slightly. Michael reached out in the dark until he found a flashlight on the table. He turned it on, its beams soft and warm against their faces. The twins looked up at the light, their fear fading. Michael sat beside Ava on the floor, their shoulders close. The room smelled of rain and lavender. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Only the sound of rain and breathing filled the space. When the storm calmed a little, Ava whispered, "When I was little, I used to be afraid of thunder too." Michael turned to her. "Really?" She nodded, her eyes still on the twins. "My mother worked as a maid for a rich family. We lived in the small room behind the kitchen. Whenever it rained, I would hide under the bed. My mother would come in after cleaning and tell me stories until I fell asleep. She used to say, 'Love is what we give, not what we get.' I didn't understand it then, but now I do." Her voice broke a little. "When I see them, I see myself. I remember what it felt like to be scared and small, just wanting someone to stay." Michael listened quietly. He had never asked about her past before. He looked at her differently now, not as someone who worked for him, but as someone carrying a story of her own. He said softly, "Your mother must have been kind." "She was," Ava said with a sad smile. "She never had much, but she gave everything she could. When she got sick, I promised her I would make children feel what I felt when she held me. Safe." Michael looked down at his sons. They were calm now, their heads resting against her arms. "You've done that," he said quietly. "You've given them what I couldn't." Ava shook her head gently. "You've given them more than you know, sir. They just needed to feel you close." He turned to her, his eyes soft. "I didn't know how," he admitted. "After Emily died, I thought control was love. I thought if I kept everything perfect, maybe the pain would stop." Ava looked at him with understanding. "Sometimes pain doesn't stop, sir. It just changes shape, but it can still teach us how to love again." Her words stayed with him long after the storm passed. The next morning, sunlight filled the house again. The storm had washed the air clean. The garden outside glittered with dew. Michael walked down the hallway toward the nursery, feeling something inside him shift. He paused at the door and watched. The twins were laughing. Ava was sitting on the floor again, helping them build a small tower with colorful blocks. When the tower fell, they laughed louder, and she laughed with them. The sound filled the room like music. Michael smiled faintly. He hadn't heard laughter like that in years. It reminded him of Emily's laugh, the kind that came from the heart. For the first time, he didn't feel the weight of the house pressing on him. It felt alive, like a real home. When Ava looked up and saw him, she smiled shyly. "Good morning, sir." He walked closer. "Good morning," he said softly. "You're early again." "I like mornings," she said simply. "They feel like a new chance." He nodded. "You've given us that chance, Ava. All of us." She lowered her eyes, her cheeks warming. "I only did what anyone would do." "No," he said quietly. "Not everyone would care the way you do." For a brief moment, their eyes met. There was something gentle in that silence, something neither of them tried to explain. As the twins laughed again, Michael looked around the room and realized the truth. The silence that once haunted this house had been broken for good. And deep down, he knew the storm last night wasn't just weather. It was life shaking his world, washing away everything that kept love out. Weeks turned into months, and the Harris mansion no longer felt like the same house. The walls that once held silence now carried laughter, the kind that made the air soft and alive. Every morning, Michael Harris would wake to the sound of movement in the nursery. Small voices trying to form words. Gentle giggles that filled the halls like music. Ava Johnson had changed everything. She was no longer just a maid in his home. She had become the heart of it. The twins, Liam and Logan, followed her everywhere. When she read to them, they listened. When she sang, they hummed along. When she smiled, they laughed. It was as if she had brought the light of his late wife, Emily, back to life through love that asked for nothing. One Saturday morning, Michael stood at the doorway, watching her help the boys paint. The floor was covered with newspapers, and their tiny hands were messy with colors. Ava knelt beside them, her black uniform dusted with small splashes of red and blue paint. The twins pointed at their drawings proudly, their eyes shining with life. "You've made quite an art class here," Michael said softly. Ava looked up, smiling. "They love painting, sir. It helps them express what they can't say yet." Michael nodded slowly. "You were right," he said. "They just needed love." Ava looked down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Everyone does, sir, even grown-ups." Her words stayed in his heart long after she said them. That afternoon, as the boys napped, Michael went into the nursery to tidy up. He saw the small, brown notebook still resting on the shelf. He picked it up, turning through Emily's words again. Every page carried warmth, every line a memory of her love. At the last page, something new caught his eye. A folded piece of paper slipped out. He opened it carefully. It was another note written by Emily, one he had never seen. The ink was faded but still readable. "If one day you find someone who makes our boys smile again, let her stay. She is a gift, not a replacement. She is love returning in a different form." Michael stood there, frozen, his eyes blurred with tears. The paper trembled in his hands. Emily had written those words long before her passing, almost as if she had known. That evening, he found Ava sitting in the garden while the twins played near the swings. The sunset painted everything in gold. He walked toward her slowly, holding the note in his hand. "Ava," he said quietly. She turned and smiled. "Yes, sir?" He sat beside her, the sound of children's laughter floating around them. "I found something today. Emily left this for me." He handed her the paper. She hesitated, then read it carefully. Her eyes softened as she finished. "She must have been a kind woman," Ava whispered. "She was," Michael said. "And she would have liked you. You brought her love back into this house." Ava shook her head gently. "I didn't bring it back, sir. It was always here. It just needed to be remembered." The twins ran up to them, laughing. Liam pointed at the swings. "Push," he said suddenly. Ava froze, her mouth slightly open. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Michael laughed softly, joy breaking through his voice. "I did." Liam said it again, louder this time. "Push." Logan joined him, repeating the same word. Ava's eyes filled with tears. She scooped them up in her arms, hugging them tight. "You did it, my babies. You spoke." Michael stood beside them, his heart full. He had dreamed of this moment for years. Now, it was real. He felt Emily's presence in the air, as if she were smiling somewhere above them. They spent the rest of the evening in the garden. The twins played until the sun disappeared behind the trees. The air smelled of roses and freshly cut grass. The mansion lights came on slowly, soft and warm. Later, as Ava tucked the boys into bed, Michael stood by the door. The twins whispered her name before drifting off to sleep. He could see how much they loved her. It was written in their faces, in the peace that covered them like a blanket. When Ava stepped out, he said quietly, "I want you to stay here, Ava. Not as an employee, but as part of this family." She blinked, surprised. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "You've given my sons a new life," he said. "And you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever: hope. You don't owe us anything, but this home will always be yours if you choose to stay." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir. I'll stay. Not because of the job, but because they're my family too." Michael smiled for the first time in years. A real smile. Then it settled. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger. Ava became their guardian, their teacher, their safe place. Michael learned to slow down, to laugh again, to be present. He joined their morning routines, helped with meals, and even painted with them. The house that once echoed with emptiness now overflowed with life. One afternoon, Michael came home early from work. He heard laughter from the backyard, the same sound that had saved his soul months ago. He followed it quietly until he reached the garden. There, under the golden light of sunset, Ava was pushing the twins on the swings. Their laughter rose high, mixing with the soft rustle of leaves. She looked up and saw him standing there, her smile warm and genuine. "Come join us, sir," she called out. He walked closer, his steps light. "I think I will." He took one of the swings beside hers and gently pushed Logan while Ava pushed Liam. The boys' laughter filled the air again. The moment felt timeless, like love reborn. As the sun dipped lower, the sky turned orange and pink. Michael looked at the three of them, the woman who had healed his home and the boys who had taught him how to love again. He whispered quietly, "Thank you." Ava turned to him. "For what, sir?" "For giving me my family back," he said. The twins laughed louder, their small voices echoing across the garden. The sound was pure, strong, and alive. Michael looked at the mansion glowing behind them, its windows reflecting the light of a home that finally felt whole. And as the last rays of sun faded away, he realized something he would never forget. Love doesn't end when a life ends. It changes shape. It finds new faces. And if your heart is open, it comes back when you least expect it. That night, as the house grew quiet again, it was no longer the silence of sorrow. It was the silence of peace. The Harris home had been reborn. And this time, it would never be empty again. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that love doesn't always speak in words. Sometimes it's found in kindness, in patience, and in the courage to care when no one else does. Michael's wealth couldn't heal his sons, but one woman's heart did what money never could. Before you leave, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from, and what did you learn from this story? If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that love still changes lives. And if you want more emotional and life-changing stories like this, hit the like button, subscribe, and comment more stories, so you'll be the first to see our next powerful story. Now, let me ask you 3 questions. 1. What do you think was the most touching part of this story? 2. Do you believe love can heal where science cannot? 3. If you were in Ava's place, would you have stayed with the twins? We can't wait to read your answers in the comments below.